Hi, so my name is Kimberly, and I create content on this channel to share my own experiences of building my self belief, self confidence, and I provide advice on how other women can do the same. I also want to inspire women to embrace their leadership potential by walking in their own self confidence. So these are topics that appeal to you. Subscribe to this channel and also just share content with other people who may appreciate it. And so today I am coming back with part two to my the series I started about my own journey. And so on this in this part, I'm going to talk about trusting my path. And so where I believe I left off in my previous video was I had been fired twice. Recap. I was grappling with it because being fired took away what I did for a living, which for me took away like an identity to kind of hide behind or present. Um, and so during this time, I embarked on the journey of reconnecting with my birth family. And so I did that. And about a year later, a year and a couple of months later, my husband and I relocated out of the state because he accepted another job and he is in the IT field. And so we moved. But for me, having reconnected with my birth family made me feel more rooted. So that when I left the state that I was from, that I had been born and raised in, I felt, I guess, more grounded in a way, more confident in a lot of ways. Because once you know where home is, you can always return, right? And so I had to start really trusting my own path because I left where I was from. And I mean, we moved 13 all right. It takes planning to get there. So I couldn't just run home. And this is when I had to start unpacking why my self belief was where it was, things I needed to do to increase it. And at this point, I had finished my bachelor's in Christian ministry. I had finished my ministry leadership certificate. And those things had ended right before we made the move. And this is where I had to start understanding and trusting that everyone has a unique path, including myself. I had to start trusting my own path. So once we moved, I ended up in a master's in divinity program. Not my plan, not my goals, nothing I had ever thought I would be called to, right? Nothing I necessarily wanted to be called to. But as things unfolded, I knew this was my path. And so I started in this program. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It was very intense program. And while I was in the program, I was still freshly connected to my birth family. So I had to still work on and unpack things about myself, right? So the more that I learned about my birth mother, who, by the way, when I connected with my biological family, was no longer alive, like I said, she was already deceased. So my reconnection did not necessarily happen to her. It happened to my siblings. It happened with my aunts, my cousins. It happened with extended family. And so everything I had to learn through them about her. And so that gave a whole different perspective because when I sought to reconnect to my birth family, my initial thought was I would meet my birth mom. I had not fathomed that she would already be deceased. And so while I'm telling the story now, 10 years later, this was a very hard time in my life. I mean, it was extremely hard because I had to really grapple with and cope with, okay, you won't meet your birth mom, right? Like you won't get to talk to her. You won't get whatever happened straight from her. You won't get it from her. You'll get it. You'll have to accept it from like her sisters, your sisters. Like I just had to settle it because settle it or not, this was what it was. And so that was a tough period in my life. And then it was a major move. We embarked on a major move. So yeah, I started following like, okay, this is God's path for me. I have to walk this path out, right? And I realized to develop my self belief, my self confidence, maybe I should start blogging or writing. I do journal. I am a journaler. I write out my feelings, my thoughts. They help me process. I talk a lot. Like I have close friends I talk to. I have a therapist. Like I talk and I write. But during this time, and it was 2015, when I got ready to start writing, I hit a wall. That's the only way I know how to describe it. Like I thought I could just start blogging, and I realized my voice was just not, I don't know, there. I started getting all of these fears. I'm not a shy person. And so I was surprised. It was like a block. It would be like a lump. Even though I was typing, I was writing, I was trying to blog, it wasn't happening. And I didn't know why. So this led me to do even deeper work. So I'm in school. I freshly moved. It was just me and my husband. And I was hitting these blocks on speaking up, on saying what I wanted to say. I started developing fears I didn't know I had, or they started surfacing. Potentially, I've always had them, but they never showed up because, like I keep saying, I'm pretty talkative and outspoken. Like I was never shy. Like I was always, as a kid on your report card, talks too much, right? Like so in high school, like my whole life was like, Kimberly, you talk too much, which is not a lie, right? And so I was surprised and I started having an existential crisis. Now, for clarity, if you take the Myers-Briggs personality test, which I love personality tests, I am a ENFP. So saying that I had an existential crisis, I mean, ENFPs maybe tend to have more crises like this than the average person, right? But this was a serious one. This was rooted in identity. We moved. I still wasn't working. I was back in school for the next master's degree, right? So I wasn't working still. I was looking for jobs, but they were not opening up because my focus was supposed to be this divinity degree, and it really did require all of my focus. It was hard content. It required a lot of thought and focus on top of still grappling with and dealing with, the reconnection process. Then I had the added, grappling of we just moved. I don't know anyone. And so I started leaning into myself. I was working on a degree. And I realized my self confidence needed to be strengthened. And so I kept trying to blog off and on, but I put it down for a while and I stepped back. And I stepped back to continue doing this inner work, which for me was like journaling. My husband would go in, mostly he would go in, sometimes he'd be home. So I would have the space to do my schoolwork, the space to myself, the space to process. And that's what I had to do. It was like important. I mean, I would not be here talking right now, moving forward. I wouldn't consult, I wouldn't coach, I wouldn't do any of those things had I not taken the time to complete the step of dealing with past doubting beliefs about myself. If I hadn't taken the time to strengthen myself, I have probably lost count on how many coaching programs I have signed up for and that I've completed. And each one of those did add a facet of what I needed. Sometimes we think, and I'll just use myself, I thought, okay, I'll do this program and boom, I'll be there. No, that was just one layer of what I needed, right? And then I needed to continue to build. It wasn't just one program hit or miss, and that's it for me. It was this program, I've completed it, it put something in place. Next step, this program. Some of them were self-paced coaching programs. Some of them were group coaching. Some of them were one-on-one. But I'm telling you, I have heavily invested, right, in building up my self confidence and my self belief. And a lot of it came through just allowing myself to be vulnerable in these coaching programs because it takes some vulnerability to allow someone to speak into areas that you want to improve. You have to even have the confidence to get the feedback, right? Like I had to even strengthen my confidence enough to even get this feedback. I also am a big reader. Like right now around my office, I could probably pick up like 8 books about self-help, about confidence, about just moving forward. I read a lot about organization, even though I'm not the most organized, but I am a heavy reader. And so for me, between coaching programs and books, and some therapy, I was able to unravel and deal with a lot of those inner beliefs that needed to be changed. I'm a deep believer in affirmations, and not like you have to be very strict with them, but just the things you speak over yourself more than the affirmation themselves. But we all understand affirmations for the most part right now. It's very popular right now. And so, really, it's just what you're saying to yourself. And so, for me, coming from a place of having been adopted and abandoned when I was a baby, I had beliefs that sounded like, oh, well, what if you're not worthy? What if everyone abandons you? I really had to dig deep. That's my story. However, it doesn't have to be as dramatic for you to still yourself need to do some of this work, right? Again, and I think I said this in my last video, it may have just been a teacher or a parent or another peer who spoke something over you when you were younger, and it just got lodged in your spirit, and it's still there. And you still doubt yourself because someone said XYZ, because someone said you don't know what you're talking about one time. Well, maybe you didn't, but that's okay. That didn't mean, stop talking, but maybe you did. Or if someone said, you're a know it all, which isn't true. Maybe you were just enthusiastic about what you knew. Maybe you just wanted to contribute. But if someone speaks this, it can get in your spirit, and it can stop you right in your tracks. Or in that moment, it might not even show up. You might shrug it off or say something back. It could be years down the line when that seed that someone planted with their words comes up, grows, and starts impacting how you show up and move. And so that's what I had to deal with. I just had to deal with self beliefs. I had to deal with what was spoken over me, and sometimes what wasn't said that you could still feel and intuit around you is also impactful. That's a whole different video. Like that could be a whole different series. Like we don't have time today because I started unpacking this and we'll just be here. As I mentioned, I'm an ENFP, and for those who don't know, that really means I can just talk and talk and talk and run around with a million ideas that lead to the next idea. The conversation never has to end. That's it. That's all I'm saying. But back to my story, on my journey. Yeah, so I was dealing with inner beliefs, getting to know a new place during this hard move, right? Like the move was hard. Like I don't even think at the time I had the words. It's now that I can look back on what happened that I'm realizing just how much went into the move, and how hard it is to leave home and leave where you're from. So yeah, it was a lot. Um, I don't regret it. I really don't. But before we moved, we had to sell our home. So it was our first home that we had purchased. We only stayed in our home 3 years. We moved from a house to an apartment, right, with this move. And it would be 5 years before we got our next home because we moved to a different place. And my husband, he traveled a lot for work. And then I started traveling with him because I was in school. So I could take my stuff on the road. Like I could take my laptop, I could take books. And so, hey, why not? And so that became more of our lifestyle. And it was very eye opening, very needed, very pivotal. But this is what I understand now. Then, while it was happening, I was still grappling with self doubt. Am I crazy? Am I lazy because I'm not working a traditional job? And so, again, this was 2015, 2016, 2017. It was pre COVID. However, now I'm realizing I was being trained for what we all know and understand now. But at that time, you couldn't tell me that. All I knew at that time was I felt like the biggest failure. I felt like I wasn't getting anything right and that I was just coasting or like not serious enough, but it's not true. Um, this was my training and these were my steps, and this was the time and the space that I needed to deal with self-belief, self-esteem, self-confidence. And I did, although it was hard. And so thank you for joining me today. Again, I am Kimberly. I am a coach and consultant. I work with Gen Z and I work with millennial women to strengthen their self-confidence and their inner beliefs. So I appreciate you for sticking it out. Subscribe, like the video, share it. I will continue talking about my journey in part 3. Thank you.